Hi, folks. How are you? Well, what's wrong with this picture? I want to stop the video right now and ask you, what do you see in this picture? Is there a problem here? Why don't you chat in the box? Okay, should bring the chat to a close and eyes back up on the screen. One of the ways this picture hits home for me is right here at our school. We have tracked programs. You know, HCC and Gen Ed. If you look at those classes, you'll see right away the HCC classes don't reflect the racial diversity of our school. And if there's a separation, there's a perceived difference, despite what you might consciously believe or say you believe. So, right at the heart of racism in America, and right at the heart of racism in Seattle and at our school, is the belief or perception, consciously or not, is that somehow race equals difference. And I want to show you a video of the effect of the belief on individual kids, the effect of racism, the belief of racism on individual kids your age. Okay? Wait for it.
Racism means basically like
A large part of a race feels that they're superior to another race, and so not only do they believe that, but they act on it.
Examples would be in class. Sometimes I'd be the only black kid, and we read a book like, I don't know, Huck Finn, and then there's that uncomfortable moment, the magic word come up, and people would look at you and like, what's his reaction and things like that.
I was walking home from school with this one white girl, and we just gotten off the bus, and we were almost home, and there were these group of black kids that just gone out of school, and she was like, "Oh, let's cross the street. There's a group of black kids. I don't want to run into them." And so she told me, which I don't even know why she would do that.
I used to wear a sweatband like just to reinforce my wrist. And I had a teacher come up to me and say, you should take it off because it looks gang affiliated.
I've been in situations where, I had to cross the street because I didn't want to scare the white lady that was walking.
It would get to the point where I would start to count how many times a woman would clutch her bag.
When I was 16, I was leaving my mom's house in my pajamas, which had snowmen on them, with my brother, and we were actually stopped by the police rather aggressively. I've been stopped by the cops on my way between classes because we have two separate buildings, walking from one building to the other building, as my white students in the same class walked by me.
It's kind of upsetting because we live in a world where my mom has to be afraid when I walk outside from the people that are like meant to protect me. And I don't like when my mother feels like that. I love my mother. I want her to always be happy.
I walk tall, I keep my head up, very, try to be very articulate and polite. And so, of course, I was like, okay, I'm going to be fine because I act a certain way. And of course, that has absolutely nothing to do with it. The way people perceive you, is not up to you. My parents taught me, cops are your friends. You're supposed to, they're here to protect you. But all I'm seeing is the opposite. So how can I not be afraid when I feel like I'm being hunted? When I feel like I'm there to fill a quota?
We are in a so-called free society. And as a black man, we literally don't feel free. We don't know what freedom is.
Every time we're killed, the first thing you see on the news is, criminal record. Or something like that. So from the second the bullet hits us, already we're starting to be dehumanized.
With black people like myself, we don't get as many chances as they do. So you have to be aware and you have to watch out and you can't mess up.
This was an extremely emotionally taxing process for me in terms of coming to terms with maybe the nature of racism in my own life and in this country and in this world. And if you wait until somebody is 12, 13, and 14 to put that on them, it can be really difficult.
My dad, he's just like the honest one. He's like, listen, son, like there are things in this world like you kind of have to watch out. He doesn't want me to live in fear, but he wants me to be aware.
I want people to know that I'm perfectly fine and I'm not gonna hurt anybody or do anything bad.
I should be judged about like who I am and like and what kind of person I am.
My parents would tell me, especially my mom, she would tell me, you have to endure, you have to muscle through it. And this is no different. It's a part of being a person of color in America.
And there's a certain comfortability associated with that, because if I know that something is inevitable, then I know how to deal with it. Fortunately, I've had parents who have said, this is what you do.
Mom and Dad, I'll be fine because you did a good job raising me. You gave me all the resources and the time, and the blood, sweat, and tears to make me a good man, an honorable man, and the foundation to survive in this country.
I want you to know that I will act in a appropriate manner and do everything that you told me to do, because I do love you, and I know that everything you say is not for a reason and not just to talk, and I love you.
So let's chat a bit. Let me stop the video again, chat in the box. Based on what you saw, what's the effect of racism on these kids? And don't forget to use text evidence. Yeah, so some of the things that came out in that video was whites have fear around blacks. They show it different ways, overtly or subtly. A lot of times blacks feel awkward being the only person of color among whites. There are stereotypes about gangs, crime. Blacks are more often stopped by the police. Fear of police, of being hunted. There's a direct quote. Some blacks feel like they have to act in a certain way so people aren't suspicious. The quote was, "We don't feel free. We don't know what freedom is." It's an overall sense of dehumanization. The young man said, as soon as the bullet hits our body, we're dehumanized. The other speaker said, "We don't get chances. We can't mess up." And then another speaker said, "I'm not seen for who I am." So the overall message is watch your back. Watching these young men, I can't help but think of the stress they're carrying. Even though they name some survival skills and coping mechanisms, thanking their parents for those and elders, I wonder about the psychological impact of always having to watch your back because the color of your back. It must be stressful, to say the least. Now, I know that my essential question for the past few weeks has been about MLK, nonviolence, and racism today. This is the racism today part. And if you were to ask me a very basic question like, forgive me for asking it, but why is racism wrong? Basic question. For me, it would come down to this. Racism causes suffering on an individual level. Racism affects how individual people experience their lives. So today, I'm wondering about this question. What are the effects of racism on individual young people, people like my own students? Well, I came across this chart. This chart shows that racism is not wrong because the idea is wrong. Racism's not just a bad idea or a wrong-headed belief system. Racism has a real impact. So can you trace the arrows from the idea part, the causes of on the left, the idea to the effects on the right? So an idea translates into behaviors, beliefs that translate into social structures, and social structures that translate into outcomes on the individual body. So, how do I begin taking, with so much on my mind about my topic that I chose because I'm interested in it, how do I take so much of my evidence and begin writing my essay? Now, last week you wrote an introduction using background info to build to your thesis. Now, if you were to do a boring, formulaic 5-paragraph essay, you'd have a single paragraph for each subtopic, and each paragraph would look about the same. But let me be honest with you, no one wants to read that. I don't want to read that. One paragraph for each idea you have is just not appropriate for sophisticated writers. That's because you need to include all sorts of things like elaboration and perspectives and quotations and continuing to build background info. So, do you remember this article from last week? I want to go through how this is structured. So, wait for it. Let's look at each of the sections. Well, last week we went through this first section, which is the intro, where the background info builds to the thesis. Now, the first subtopic creates the historical context. It shows the problems King was dealing with. And then the second subtopic, and it's so nice that they're labeled, shows his struggles and setbacks. And the third subtopic extends the effect of King's work from just after his death to the Black Lives Matter movement. And it looks like this article is using an interview with King's daughter as a sort of conclusion. So, if you are going to write your essay, you want it to look like a real essay, a real article. You don't want it to have the 5 boxy sections that all look the same. So today I want to teach you to organize your ideas and evidence systematically in an outline. This will make it easier for you to write. It's also important because you want to compose your essay logically to make it easier for your reader to see how all the parts fit together. So even though we're not writing a 5-paragraph essay, we can still use the basic concept of organizing our main idea into boxes, different subtopics, and bullets, evidence and analysis. Let's take a closer look at what goes into organizing evidence and ideas. Now, I'm taking in an article from, hold on, go back here for a second. I'm going to take an article from News ELA. It's called Kids Exposed to Racism Have Higher Risks of Depression and Sickness. So I took this essay, this article, and I annotated it. I want to analyze it for you to show how it's structured. I want to show you the skeleton of it. So it doesn't begin with the conclusion. It begins with a title. And the thing about News ELA, their titles are almost always their thesis sentences. So it has the title slash thesis. First paragraph, it's only one sentence long, is the thesis plus a little bit of background. And then the second paragraph gives some background info to the thesis and a little bit of elaboration, the dangers of racism in our current political environment. A little bit more background information, what's in the news today, what's on social media and on Twitter. Kids are exposed to so much racism, it's having an effect on them. Gives a little real life situation, little tiny real life situation about Donald Trump. Some of the statements that he's made have been viewed as racist. And we've also got, not coincidentally, the rise of white supremacists at the same time who believe that whites are superior to others. So the intro concludes by suggesting the complexity of the topic. We're in a new age of racism. The second section has a header showing the subtopic, which is really convenient. You can do that too. The second subtopic is elaborates on the health issues that are an effect of racism. And it gives first piece of evidence African Americans are more likely to die of diabetes, have heart disease, and high blood pressure. And black kids are 4 times more likely to be admitted to the hospital for asthma. There's an analysis of that evidence indicating that because of the social structures, African Americans are more likely to have lower income levels, lower education, exposure to pollution, and lack of access to high quality health care, all of which impacts health. There's an increased risk of depression along with heart disease, and further evidence that shows that lower birth weight, African American mothers have lower birth weight babies due to discrimination and racism. The second subtopic studies the effects of harassment and stress on individuals experiencing racism. There's a higher risk of depression, sickness, and being overweight, and worse sleep. It goes on to elaborate what stress is and how it affects the body and the connection of stress and racism. It develops this idea with 3 pieces of evidence. And then the article has a lengthy conclusion, not just tacked on, but a conclusion that rephrases the thesis in a brand new way based on what you've just read. It gives conclusions that you can derive based on the evidence, and there's a call to action, what doctors should do in this case, and looking to the future, what comes next. This is not a 5-paragraph essay, but it has a lot of the same stuff that you already know about. It has a thesis. All this stuff has background info, evidence, analysis, subtopics. This is the skeleton of the article and it has all these parts. Okay? So as you consider how to formulate your own essay, you want to consider the different parts. The outline on the right is the skeleton to the article I just skimmed. All of the parts hang together logically. A 5-paragraph essay outline is the same for every single 5-paragraph essay, but not all outlines are the same. However, they have the same parts. So I wanted to show you the skeleton of the article so you could see the parts. You're familiar with those parts: subtopic, elaboration, evidence, analysis, and background info. Now, a true outline has pieces of your research. An outline is a map of how those parts go together. So these parts are the skeleton right here. But this part is the true outline that has all the pieces of evidence, analysis, and elaboration in the order that makes sense for writing it. Now, I want you to write an outline for your essay. I want you to plan it out so you're not just jumping from your notes or your head to drafting. Now, whoops, sorry. That's right. Don't just jump from your notes and your head to drafting because it's a messy, chaotic way to compose an essay. And that runs the risk of having poor organization. Now, you're familiar with all those parts. If I ask you to build an outline, some of you are going to ask for a template that you can follow. Something like this. Say, give me that, Mr. Kirschman. But the problem is if you follow a template just like this, your essay is going to be formulaic because you're trying to follow a template. I don't expect your essay to be structures identical to the News ELA article, and I don't expect everyone's essay to look exactly alike. One way to think about the possible logical ways you can write an outline is to Google outline of research middle school papers or outline of research paper middle school. I'll show you. I did it myself. Wait for it. Here it comes. Here it comes. So if you Google outline of research paper middle school, you're going to come up with all sorts of outlines. They all have some really basic elements in common. They don't have everything in common, but find the ones that work for you. Okay? I don't want you just looking for one kind of outline and expect that that's going to work forever. Okay, this is your work this week. Review your evidence, name your subtopics, put evidence under your subtopics, identify the parts, background info, elaboration, and analysis for each subtopic, and then organize those parts into an outline. This video will be posted on Schoology. And now, what questions do you have?